You want to go ahead?
Yeah. So a good hello to everyone that's arrived already. I would invite also, I don't believe that all of the seats will be taken at the end. So feel free if you're sitting behind because all of the places are marked. Feel free to hop in, come into the main circle and just move move your flag, move the sign a bit to the side. I think we don't have much time. We are expected to close this session at 1 o'clock because there is also other meetings going on. So I would suggest we start we just start the discussion, even though some people might still be coming in. But since we only have 30 minutes. I think that might be the wise choice. So from introduction from my side, I'm Uroš Vajgl. I'm the State Secretary for Environment and Climate Change from Slovenia. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to attempt with Matthew to co-moderate this debate. We've already heard quite some amount of statements and expertise at the previous sessions. We've also gotten lots of documents and good ideas in those. I would like to highlight one point that came to my attention the most reading to the materials, and that is that infrastructure as such has a huge effect in the achievement of sustainable development and achievement of SDGs. Infrastructure is a prerequisite or is tightly connected, and it plays an important role across all 17 of the main of the SDG goals, and it plays an important role in the achievement of 92% of the 169 targets. I would actually question which 8% are not linked with infrastructure. And one thing I would point out before giving the floor to Matthew is that I think we have all in this room dealt with sustainable development for either parts or for the whole all of our careers. And we've all encountered the issues and challenges linked to infrastructure. We've all faced limitations or seen that the limitations that may be in place due to the lack of or inappropriateness of infrastructure, but we've also all seen the opportunities that infrastructure can create. We know what infrastructure enables. We also know what it costs. We know what it costs directly. We're getting more and more knowledge on indirect costs. We know that the costs are not purely financial, that the social, the environmental costs, and we all certainly have views or ideas that we could share. So one thing that I would encourage you is that alongside the statements that you might make on behalf of the organization or country that you come from, I would also invite you to come out with personal reflections. I would like to engage you that we try to use this half an hour to make this a dynamic and fluent discussion. So from my side, I would give to Matthew, who I think will also share some of his expertise.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to see more people coming into the room. So as Uroš was mentioning, let's try to make it as interactive as possible. And I think that's the benefit of the roundtable. It's a little bit less formal. So feel free to jump in and share your views on the different questions we will be dealing with today. So just as a word of introduction of where I'm coming from, I'm from the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. So as you can understand from the title, we focus very much on how to make the infrastructure systems more resilient to disaster risk. And so we are the focal point for the international agreement called the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which has actually a target for on infrastructure related to infrastructure and to reduce the disaster damages to critical infrastructure and the disruption of basic services. So what we're doing at the UNDRR, the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, we are trying to help countries to build or to embed the principle of resilience into the infrastructure development plan. So we have created a principle for resilient infrastructure, that 6 principles that have been endorsed by 100+ countries. So those principles, now we're working with different countries to help them to implement them into every phases of the infrastructure projects. And another tool I wanted to mention to you, just as a way of illustration, we're also developing a methodology for stress testing infrastructure systems. So to see how the infrastructure system will react in case of a disasters, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the actions that are needed to reduce the consequences of those disasters, but also to prevent those from happening. So that's very quick. Then we have a regional office based in Brussels that is covering specifically this European region. So feel free to reach out to us for questions related to resilience of infrastructure. So those were just a quick introduction of where I'm coming from. So you have that information with you when we're discussing. So maybe we can start with the first very broad question, which is about the challenges and bottlenecks that you are seeing in your countries for developing sustainable infrastructure. And I think there's been a lot of discussion about what is sustainable infrastructure, a lot of question about what are the definition of sustainable infrastructure we can speak about. And maybe in your intervention, you can think about, is it for you more about developing a low carbon economy? Is it more about increasing the resilience of infrastructure system? Is it more about improving access to basic services? Is it more about reducing the environmental footprint of infrastructure projects? And for instance, how you make infrastructure development more aligned with a circular economy. So I think that's very broad theme. So we decided that maybe as a first question to keep it relatively open, but we'll be very grateful for any views you might have on what are the challenges that you are facing in countries, or maybe some of the best practices that you have in mind for developing sustainable infrastructure in your country. Yes, sure, Armenia, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry for late. We just finished. I think the discussion and the topic that you have identified is very important in our region, especially in Armenia. My name is Gayane Gabrelian. And I think for Armenia, for this moment, if we're talking about sustainable infrastructure, this is the main the challenge that we don't use the appraisal of a project in multi-sectoral criteria and make the economic rate of return and understand how we should prioritize the project to understand what we want to have. But in this regard, in Armenia in 2021, we have implemented the public investment management policy. And I think this is the best answer to the question, what is the infrastructural capital investment and what is the prioritization of that, and to understand how can social projects can be appraised with economic projects and to find the best solution. If it is economic rate of return or it is maybe strategic decision, but anyway, it must be done by systematically decision and institutional way. So we have 4 criteria like human capital creation, like risk dimension, and infrastructural criticality. And as we make this piloting, we understood that all social projects go up and all economic projects left behind. So that's why we input this 5th criteria like ERR to understand what is the economic impact of this project. And this makes sense because now we have already 2 high-level in Prime Minister infrastructural sessions that make this appraisal of projects. And I think, and now with IMF and Minister of Finance and Minister of Environment implementing climate public investment management to understand in macro level what we're thinking about climate investment, why we should invest for climate and specifically in infrastructural projects. I'm sorry to be late, I'm finalizing, but this is the main answer that we want to know: the net present value, the cost benefit analysis, and why we should invest to this climate and green agenda. And do we invest and then get what we wanted, because the last phase of the challenges is the monitoring of the whole process, starting from planning, implementation, and contract management, and monitor to understand what we have done wrong about our thinkings and about implementation, because we have green procurement, green investment, and all this thinking and budget targeting. I think this is a complex of points that we need to understand, and to have this green line in all our economy system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I don't see more, maybe I just have a follow-up question for you. So in terms of, so you mentioned that public investment policy was recently approved. So what were the main challenges for you? For instance, you mentioned those criteria. Maybe if you have one concrete example of one of the challenges for maybe, I don't know, and what are the lessons learned a little bit while you're doing this? Thank you.
So thank you very much, because this is the best question that I will expect it to hear from you, because this is the reason that we implement this system, but now people, government, agencies must use this tool, because this is about projects, how project idea come to project implementation and monitoring. But we have several training sessions to get these all ministries to give them this power. That power is in your hands. This is not Minister of Economy or Minister of Environment or Minister of Finance who must give you the idea what you clearly want to do. You need to find your idea, to make it in the simple template with these 5 blocks of understanding what is the project main idea, what is the financial, what is the fiscal risks, because Minister of Finance will make the appraisal of fiscal space, etc. And then we will help you to go through this project implementation, because first and the main challenge in Armenia, this is planning. We don't want to spend time for planning. We want to go, I need money, they give us money, we take this money, okay, what we should do? Do you have any project there in your table? But it is not about it. We have to have this pipeline of projects, and when we get this money, we clearly understand when we want to put this money and to have these targets. I think this. Thank you.
Thank you. No, very useful and very informative to see that very practical experience. So thank you so much for that. So I see NGO would like the floor. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to give an answer to some of your questions. As a representative of environmental NGOs from across the region, we're here with a delegation of environmental groups from across our region. So generally speaking, very much welcome the theme of the conference. It's very timely. Across the region, infrastructure development is needed for the energy and mobility transition, for the transition to carbon neutrality and zero pollution. Our region actually needs to accelerate even further the energy transition to 100% renewables. We believe we can achieve this by 2040. We believe it's the only economically, socially, and ecologically reasonable pathway. And even in face of the current energy crisis, we believe we cannot go back to energy production from coal. We need to phase out nuclear energy too. So all investments, all subsidies should be channeled into long-term sustainable energy solutions. 100% renewables can and must ensure energy independence in our region and energy sufficiency. Unfortunately, there's a lot of false solutions out there as well in terms of infrastructure development. For instance, waste to energy is one technology that we as environmental groups believe is amongst those false solutions. It leads to more emissions, it leads to toxic waste. It's basically a different way of burning fossil fuels if you burn plastic waste. We also believe there's a lot of innovative solutions out there that we are not exploring fully. It's clear that every large-scale infrastructure development leads to, comes with risks for biodiversity protection, for our nature. It can cause pollution and resource depletion, and very often it doesn't benefit local communities, but it degrades the environment. It might even displace them. So we believe that all infrastructure development, especially for the energy transition, must go hand in hand with our targets for biodiversity protection and nature restoration. We believe that 100% renewables are possible in a nature positive way and in a people-centered way. Governments these days are very much tempted by taking shortcuts on public participation, given that we all want to accelerate that transition. We also think that this is very dangerous. Sustainable infrastructure depends on public participation. And now in phases, we have to keep up both environmental protections, but also public participation. There is already a lot of resistance against large-scale infrastructure, and now cutting down on public participation will actually come with even more legal risk for investors, rather than speeding up the process. There's many reasons why licenses or also environmental impact assessments take a long time, but the reason is not healthy and meaningful public participation. And then let me allow just one last comment, also referring back to something that we heard from a keynote speaker this morning. I mean, it's true that across the region, in many parts of the region, citizens are already provided with very good basic infrastructure, basic service provisions, mobility, energy, etc. But we shouldn't be too complacent in our region. So not only here in Cyprus, citizens suffer from a lack of, for instance, affordable and sustainable mobility. We have millions of people faced with energy poverty, many of them women, by the way. And even access to clean drinking water is not a given in the 21st century in one of the richest areas of the world. For instance, 1 in 3 Roma people, our biggest ethnic minority, do not have access to drinking water at their homes. That's several million people deprived of drinking water. So let's make sure that we use this opportunity to get together in the region to achieve 100% renewables, to work towards a zero carbon future, housing and industry, which is nature positive and people centered, and that infrastructure developments are focused on human needs and planetary well-being first. And we as environmental groups are here to work with our governments, with you, to achieve these objectives together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I fully agree on you with the public participation. I think that's also one of the principles for resilient infrastructure that we have developed. That's a key pillar in those principles, because as you said, those needs to be meet people's needs and take people's consideration into mind. I see Greece would like to take the floor.
Thank you. Very briefly, I want to say that, okay, obviously, Greece, as being a part of the EU, has access to a lot of funding and has to follow very specific rules as all EU countries. I think the EU has a very firm legislation, either hard or soft legislation, with benchmarks and prerequisites and all sorts of ways to make mandatory the aspect of sustainability when it comes to infrastructure projects. And I think this can serve as a good example on how you can do it. Of course, you can't go from zero in one day. You need, but you can. I'm sure that there are useful elements for the countries that are not members of the EU that can copy paste from there or get inspiration on how this can be done in practice. On the other hand, there are infrastructure projects that by default, they promote sustainability at large. For example, a wastewater treatment plant. Still, I can tell you, we get a lot of resistance against them. People don't want to change anything. They're happy the way they are. They don't see the problem. They don't see the problem because it's underground. It goes to the groundwater, so they don't see it. So there's no problem. The same goes for the waste. The waste disappears somehow. And when you try to make a legal installation, waste treatment installation, the way it must be, then people react. They don't like it because they don't like the idea. It's not about paying. It's they don't like the idea that there's going to be a waste treatment installation, a waste hot spot, because a waste treatment installation is a waste hot spot Whereas if waste is dispersed everywhere or anywhere, we don't know where, but somewhere, obviously, then there's no problem. So I'm saying this, but because I get the feeling that public participation and local communities and that, okay, it all sounds very, very good. In practice, it's most of the times it's an element that hinders progress, and that's the reality of things. I'm not a traditional politician, so I speak the truth. And also, I wanted to mention that okay, we hear magic solutions from NGOs. Unfortunately, they don't exist. They cannot happen. 100% renewables. It cannot happen. At least not anytime soon. It cannot happen because the grid cannot get the 3 times the capacity it has now, because that's what you need with 100% renewables. Plus, you always need the base load. So, okay, there are renewables that can be used as base loads, such as hydroelectrics or biogas. But also hydroelectrics comes with a lot of environmental issues. So you need to find the right balance, and there are no easy solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those views. And I think that reminds me one thing that we see also in resilience is that a lot of investment that are not visible are not prioritized. And so because investment in resilience is something that you don't see immediately, you don't have a visible impact, a little bit what you're saying about other investment, then sometimes they don't get prioritized, although they have very, very important benefit down the line. So I think that's how to break that circle between the short-term vision and the long-term benefit. I think that's really the key when we're talking about sustainable infrastructure. But maybe I turn over to moderator for...
No, I'm following the debate. I think it's many issues are opened. On the 100% renewables, I would say it's a matter of timing. We will certainly have in the future, we will need to have 100% renewables. It's a question of when this can be attained, and hopefully it will. I think we all agree it should be attained as soon as possible. The second question is the thought that comes to mind in relation to this. Sort of a regulatory criteria for infrastructure. That in one side it's important to establish minimum standards. On the other side, what we see is that through regulatory, not the lower hanging fruit, but to more complex solutions on circular society solutions or use of digital, etc. We might not be in time to regulate, especially if this regulation is, for instance, which applied, for instance, within the European Union and then extended to other areas. I think we need to probably to be a bit more flexible in the way that we are achieving. But I mean, this perhaps is something that further national experiences could also be shared with. And we have a couple of other speakers, so I would pass on the floor, if I may, first to Palestine and then continue with Austria, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you by the name of Palestine delegation. I start my speech with 3 questions. How we can make our lands green at the time we cannot reach these land because of the separated worlds. How we can speak about using ICT in sustainable development without have the freedom to have our 4G or 5G as the all of the states of the world. It is forbidden for us. How can we green our lands without the freedom to use our natural resources and water? I think that the most critical question is not we face the problem of how in Palestine we have the ability. And we think that there is a problem, but yani I respect that you start with the questions of the challenge. Theoretical, we have many ideal plans, but in the fact, we face some problems. There is something related with all the systems that we activate only evaluation and forget monitoring and follow-up. So that when we have for plans for 3 years, we discover at the end that we don't follow up. I think related with the relation with the environment, the real problem, there is a gap between the people and the environment all over the world. So that if we reduce the gap, if you focus on citizenship, also education on citizenship, this will help us, I think, to have initiatives, things in the society. The last thing I want to share in this aspect, I think that there is a lot to do. There is a lot, and it is the time to do that, because now we have, for example, in all documents, speaking about climate change, about sustainable, but we must reflect it as behavior, as a culture, not as a project, not as a paper. This is the things. It's good to give the priority to redesign inputs if we want to redesign outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, and I think that's a very important element that you mentioned. I think maybe because I see that we are running a bit out of time, so maybe we can give the floor to Austria now, and then Finland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, co-chairs, and particularly also for pushing us to an interactive discussion. And it would have been great if we have more of that in the whole program of the conference. I wanted to pick up some points we already heard, and then maybe also share some best practices from the Austrian side. So you asked the question at the beginning, what is sustainable infrastructure? And I think one important aspect of it is that we need to talk about reducing the environmental footprint of infrastructure projects. And the challenge there of course, is, and this is what we heard already yesterday and today, is that infrastructure projects have long-term impacts. If you get your decision right, it's good. If you take wrong decisions, then you will have to live with them for many, many years. So what was helpful in Austria is also what we see in the last 2 to 3 years is actually the political will. The current constitution of our ministry combines environment, climate, energy, innovation, technology, and infrastructure, and even transport. So it's quite a huge portfolio. But of course, then at the end, it's easier because it's always the same minister who has to decide. And our minister focuses very much on energy transformation and climate change. So she requested an evaluation of road infrastructure projects which had been in the pipeline for more than 20 years. And after the evaluation, on the basis of this scientific evaluation, she then decided which infrastructure projects she will not pursue anymore because they are not state-of-the-art or they are not compatible with our Paris Agreement goals. So this, of course, helped a lot. And it was important to have also planning instruments in place, which you then can use for long-term planning. And I just want to mention the Austrian Federal Railways. They have a federal planning and finance instrument for the investments of the network infrastructure. This is now in place until 2026. And the investments are now shifted to more investments into public transport, into new infrastructure, into digitalization, more speed, etc. So really to shift from road to rail, also with freight transport. So this is what we are trying to do with this planning instrument. And I wanted to also reflect on one aspect which was mentioned before, public participation. We heard this. And I just wanted to say that this is really an important part when you think about infrastructure planning. It is not only about environmental impact assessment, but also about applying the Aarhus principles. And the experience in our country is if you have public participation from the very beginning and already involve public and citizens in the planning, then this even speeds up actually the timeframes of projects. Because if you don't do this from the very beginning, then you risk that you will have hiccups along the process, which then might slow down the overall planning cycle of infrastructure projects. I leave it with that. If possible at all, I might come back to one of the other questions later, but I leave it with that now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think you highlight something that we have seen in many projects is also this coordination between different ministries, and the fact that in your case you have this kind of cross or multi-sector ministry that covering these important aspects of environment, climate, transport, and energy together. Maybe a way to address some of the issue we see then when those ministries are actually not together, or maybe where other mechanisms need to be put in place to improve the interministerial coordination. So over to Finland, then the USA, and then I think I don't know, we'll see on time where we are. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to make an example from Finland. We are just setting up a new legislation about buildings, and in that new legislation, there is a requirement to make an assessment of the carbon footprint of the whole building, starting from the planning phase down to the whole lifespan of the building. And it's required to enlist all the components of the building in terms of circular economy as well. And all the planning phase is also encouraged to calculate the carbon handprint in a standard manner. But another thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is how the investors are recently been working with the green money, to put it this way, to this new kind of money that is now being produced all over. It's quite clear that in terms of investors, they are really fighting to find the best areas especially in the infrastructure where do no significant harm principle can be used, and you can actually use like green bonds for as a vessel to develop infrastructure, and those are developing very fast from our point of view, at least in Finland. And it's nice to see how clearly these things are making real efforts in terms of quantitative assessment, how the carbon footprints and everything are going down, and how the nature positive things are included in the planning phase. But one thing that I want to end up with is that fact that there ain't too many areas where we know so much about future than in the area of ecological sustainability. We have everything already what we need to know in order to make things sustainable in terms of resilience towards climate change, for example, or biodiversity, or the mitigation of the climate change, and taking into account the circular economy. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for such a very good point. And I think I've worked a lot with investors, and I can see the demand for investing in green infrastructure, and sometimes the lack of information about what are those green infrastructures. So the example you're making about the carbon footprint of building is certainly going in that direction, and I think that we're going to see much more of that in the years to come. With this, maybe to the United States of America.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, maybe just to say, because time-wise, that I think we will have to close the list of speakers. So what we have on the list, it's the USA, and then Jordan coming in for the first time, and then I would ask if replies from NGO in Palestine, I believe, if they could be kept short. Please, sorry for this, USA.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to echo many of the ideas that have been stated here. I think everyone acknowledges that the complexity of infrastructure, project planning, and implementation. One of the points that was raised, and that's important to emphasize, is that this is a data-driven, science-based, it has to be a data-driven, science-based process. And the Deputy Minister of Environment from Armenia talked about the importance of monitoring and evaluating. And I wanted to add to that the importance of planning ahead of time that's based on scientific data that is collected, echoing the point from Finland that, you know, the complexity of ecological planning is known and requires a science-based approach. And in order to provide services to the people, to echo what my colleague from Austria and also from the environmental NGOs have said, public participation is fundamental to long-term sustainability action planning. And it has to be a very legitimate process where people are involved, not just informed of the discussion, but involved in finding solutions. And one example I wanted to give is after the first conflict in Ukraine, the United States, along with Norway, Japan, Italy, and other partners, started a program in 7 municipalities where we helped them bring together a multi-stakeholder process of local civil society organizations, business community, municipal leaders, and others, journalists and others, to engage in a conversation on local energy and environmental action planning at the city level. And I can assure you that the conversations I had with those municipal leaders was the same ones I have with mayors across the world. And they're really at the forefront of driving the solutions that we're all speaking about because they understand the people and they're closest to the citizens that are using the services we are discussing here today. And so I just wanted to reinforce this message and to say that when President Biden took office, one of the first executive orders he issued included a very specific focus domestically in the United States around environmental justice, which is the principle of providing access to information to your citizens, allowing them to participate and giving them the opportunity to participate in decision-making, and then providing access to justice in environmental matters. And this is a commitment that the United States has, not just within our country, but also as we encourage other countries to focus on broader issues of sustainability and looking at planning and developing infrastructure for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jordan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just I want to deliver maybe an example, what we are doing now in Jordan. As we start the Jordan Economic Modernization Vision 2033, maybe before 3 months, we start to work actually on the ground, maybe, let's say, in the climate and for the energy. One of the most major pillar we are concentrating on now is the industries and the manufacturing in Jordan, that we should maybe transform these industries for the climate or to respond for the climate change in the world. So Jordan now established the Jordan Manufacturing Development Fund. This fund, it could give a grants actually for any factory in Jordan who want to change, let's say, the system to be response for the climate change and for the energy saving, which is the most important thing now in Jordan. Also, this fund, which my organization, JETCO, is responsible for it, also we can give grants, actually, not only loans. We can give grants for some factories, especially in rural areas, if they want to go for a green formation in their systems, and also for the waste recycling. This is maybe now we start actually steps on the ground in this area. Also, the government in Jordan, we share with the citizen if they want to go for solar energy in their houses and to start to work on solar energy. Actually, there are a fund in the government that they could share with them some of the cost of this transformation. So I think we start maybe as this vision is focusing on to raise the standard of living of our citizens in Jordan. So we start on the ground with, let's say, with the good steps from maybe 3 months until this moment. And also we are looking maybe for another practices in another world so as we can work with it in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we had two more. I would ask you to be brief, the ones that had to comment. And I see private sector flag. I think it would be good to have also just a brief intervention also from private sector. Maybe we go with you first, and then with the two replies. Then unfortunately we've run out of time, but we can continue informally.
Thank you very much for the floor. My name is Efthymios Karokopos. I'm coming from Greece, from private sector. The company Athens Calls Athens, a cultural organization having the aim to connect all the universities and research centers of cities having the name of Athens around the world, 68 cities around the world. So having a managerial and project management background and seeing the 6 questions posed on the screen, allow me to make a short comment. All these questions related to strategy issues. When we are talking about what and how, we talk about ends, means, and ways. That means strategy. So, having heard Armenia, United States, Greece, point of view regarding this issue, and seeing the 6 questions, we have a converging approach to these 6 specific questions. Briefly, my contribution to this forum. Since the rate of climate change is faster than the effectiveness of the measures taken by countries regarding the sustainable development and greening tourism, time is a very critical factor. And in order to establish a globalized and a regional environmentally sensitive culture and posture on this serious problem, as well as to establish a comprehensive or holistic whole of government and intergovernmental approach, awareness on climate change, our organization would like to propose some specific actions. First of all, design of a comprehensive communication plan. That means we have to convince the people attached to the Sustainable Development Strategy related to sustainable development and all associated strands of green economy, aiming to cover all countries around the world and make every individual and organization or enterprise participants of a new commonly acceptable and effective stance or culture on climate change. Secondly, establishment of a comprehensive knowledge management tool regarding the sustainable development and the associated facets of the modern economy, at individual, community, city, regional, country, etc. level, EDS, an open library of theoretical and practical knowledge accessible to every individual entity, aiming to facilitate, first, the awareness, second, the adoption, third, the implementation with an easy and fast way of the best implemented policies, strategies, practices on this issue. That means to create a green, sustainable development project management tool. The approach of Armenia was the description of the project management. But now our proposal is to create a green or sustainable development management, project management tool. Since we face an increasing rate of urbanization all over the world, and at the same time, a severe intensity of climate change phenomena, which headed to cities, that means starting in underpopulated areas, the organization of a common conference where sustainable development, resilience, and innovation under the auspices of United Nations relative agencies can be met every 2 years will be of utmost importance because these domains are interdependent and thus we could enhance the effectiveness and intercomplementarity on these fields of interest. Last but not least, creation of a modular tier sustainable development certified educational and management system where the whole school approach will be connected with the whole institute approach, encompassing in a coherent way individuals, organizations, enterprises, and universities through public-private partnership. Adopting a top-down approach, that means oriented to the decision makers, not only with a bottom-up approach, that means schools. Very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those insights. And I think it's very useful. And there are, and maybe we can follow up later on, but there are some tools that are trying to do that what you're describing. So maybe there's some connection that can be made. So NGOs, very quickly, so very sorry, we're running out of time. We wish we had more time, and I think it's a very, very useful discussion. But so I'll give you the floor, but if you can keep it relatively short, thank you.
I should do my best to be very brief. Firstly, I wanted to thank everyone for their comments, practically all of which I agree with, maybe an exception. But I coming as an NGO from Austria, I can only underscore that is, we share exactly the same views and see many, many positive developments. In fact, I have another good practice example. What was mentioned also by, I think, the UNEP deputy director, and again mentioned by the US, by Austria, it's many people, is the need for planning, like really, really elaborate planning and public participation at the planning level. And it's only through that process do you actually get the sort of information that you need in order to have a sustainable project and ensure biodiversity. So the example from Austria is the expansion of wind power and solar in Burgenland, of Austria. It had incredible participation from the very, very start, involving also the use of citizen science, so using NGOs to feed into the process and make information not only available for experts, but also for the general public. So exactly the sort of capacity building, awareness building that was needed. I also appreciate that, so the planning has also made this entire process from the very start of zoning to the final permitting of the projects super fast, really, really incredible fast, with absolutely no resistance whatsoever. But we appreciate also the comments made about the need for monitoring. And so in this example, we need to still continue forward with this on monitoring. The last issue, I just want to briefly issue the issue raised about the technical feasibility of infrastructure being sustainable. And we expect people at this conference to be visionary. There is a Paris Agreement compatibility energy scenario, which shows how the EU can by 2040 technically and practically be 100% renewable. And leading scientists, many argue in the world that the world itself can be 100% renewable by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And brief, please.
Well, thank you. Actually, I will speak from civil society perspective, as I am the Secretary General of the Arab Campaign for Education for All. Besides, I am part of the Palestinian delegation. I just want to add some points. The first things that I think the accountability is very important when we are speaking about how to protect the environment. Most of the service that the governments do on the ground, sometimes after a while, you need to rebuild it again. And even when we build the hospitals, when we build the schools, when we build all the public properties, we didn't take in our consideration, for example, how we can take in our attention what we called it the wastage water. How we can really protect the environment inside the school, inside the hospitals. And that's why sometimes there is nobody but these companies or even the government under accountability. And the people in general, sometimes they are afraid to make any kind of campaigns in order to get the public service in a good way. This is one of the things that we are facing. And that's why when it came to the civic education in the school, it is very important, because when you speak about sustainability, which this word is come along in this conference, the sustainability will not come through funding or from strategy on the paper. The sustainability is ideas, is beliefs. If you have sustainability, if you have ideas and beliefs and belonging to the public service, when the people feel that the public service is for them, then we can get the sustainability. In the pandemic, those who have ideas, they succeed to respond to the pandemic. But those who have millions of dollars and they don't have ideas and they don't have beliefs, they didn't able to work. So the sustainability, when we are speaking about sustainability education goals, this is from my point, this is the sustainability. There is a lot of things on the ground. It needs the people to be aware about that. So the awareness of all the challenges that we are facing when we are speaking about infrastructure is very important. And this is the responsibility of the governments. The curricula should be reviewed, and we should build in the civic education, because the people who will protect the environment, not the government. Because the problem now in many countries, the people, they feel that this service is not belonging to them. That's why they destroyed sometimes the schools. They destroy the hospitals. They destroy the street, because they think this public service is for the government, not for the people. And this is where is the disasters thing. The last one, and excuse me, you speak about funding and financing. We need transforming financing. We need the financing to be effective, efficiency. Otherwise, we will ask for increasing the budget without thinking about the transforming and the transformative, and then the funding will call for the running cost. And we will have at the end, teachers don't believe in protecting the environment, and they don't care about the climate change. And the other point, I am a Palestinian, and I will tell you a story. When the people, they lost their consciousness, the political conflict sometimes is dangerous if we don't put the pressure on those people to look from their humanity to this, to the environment. For example, in Palestine, in West Bank, when the settlers, they angry with the Palestinian, they cut olives. Till now, they cut maybe more than, I can say, 1,000 of olives tree. Why? Why you are doing this? And I can say, maybe some Palestinian angry with the Israeli, they burn the forest. Here, I think the civic education can.
Really need.
Thank you.
I'm really sorry, but we are already way off time, and I think I really the point about the ideas and the beliefs and the importance for seeding the plans for sustainability, I think are very, very important. And just coming back to what you said about the funding, the importance of making sure the funding is actually spent effectively, I think it's a very crucial aspect. I think there are some studies showing that about a third of the money spent on infrastructure is actually not delivering the impact. So there are a lot of things that could be done to make sure that we have the bang for the buck when we're talking about infrastructure financing. And I think also very interested to hear the Jordanian experience on how to incentivize the change through financial incentives. And I think that's something that would be very important to learn more of it. So I think there are a lot of very good ideas in this room, and I'm really sorry we don't have more time to go through them. And I think we have a lot of topics we wanted to cover. But personally, I really want to thank you for your great participation, and it's been a real pleasure to be with you on this session and talk about sustainable manufacture. But final words to you, Urs.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, indeed, I concur that we covered a broad range of topics, everything from project management tools to practices on financing, the importance of international cooperation, the cross-sectoral approach was mentioned. I think this can be also connected to the question of accountability. We've had the importance of science-based decision-making, as well as a series of connected interventions on public participation, environmental justice, problem of not in my backyard, effects on infrastructure. And also in the final remark, this connection back to one of the other main themes of this conference being the connecting again education then with infrastructure, which really closes well. I think also this session in noticing how all of these challenges and tasks ahead of us are connected. And hopefully we didn't have much time now to interact further, but hopefully we still have a day and a half of the conference to go. And I encourage us all to continue on sharing between each other. And I thank you very much for the input.